Congress has set aside a specific fund for programs like SNAP for emergencies. And as the judge put it in federal court today, quote, "It's hard for me to understand that this is not an emergency when there's no money and a lot of people are needing their SNAP benefits." I think it's really important to be clear about what Republicans were trying to do here. They were ginning up excuses to actively force 42 million Americans to lose their SNAP benefits when they didn't have to. They were choosing to take food away from 42 million of the poorest Americans while trying to accuse Democrats of what Johnson and Republicans were actually doing. I mean, J.D. Vance actually laid out what was happening really clearly today, believe it or not.
They are trying to take a hostage, and we can't reward that behavior.
Taking a hostage, using food that tens of millions of Americans needed as a hostage to negotiate with. That is what Republicans in Congress are trying to do here. And today, Mike Johnson laid out why. Here was Speaker Johnson earlier today responding to a question about why he wouldn't just move money around to fund SNAP. Take a listen.
Because if you deviate from the goal of reopening the entire government, Chuck Schumer and the radicals over there will continue to play games with people's paychecks, their livelihoods. And if you do just part of this, it will reduce the pressure for them to do all of it.
There you have it. That is the game that Republican leaders are playing here. They are using Americans as leverage. They are trying to purposefully make the shutdown more painful on the poorest Americans, on federal employees, too, to put pressure on Democrats to cave, each time lying and saying their hands were tied. I mean, right as the shutdown started, the administration used it as an excuse to try to lay off thousands of federal workers, saying they had to because of the shutdown. That was their arguments. Now, courts have since indefinitely paused those layoffs because they are very likely illegal. Remember, the core of this entire shutdown is that Republican leaders are refusing to extend tax subsidies that make health care affordable for millions of Americans. Costs could double or they could even triple for millions of Americans. And yet, Republicans are refusing to acknowledge the very real pain that would be inflicted on Americans if those subsidies are not extended.
They're out here decrying the so-called forthcoming health care crisis, they say.
I don't think this is going to be any kind of gut-wrenching problem if these enhanced subsidies just go away.
Unless those tax credits are extended, those subsidies, the average plan will increase for Americans by somewhere around 115%. Do you believe that Congress should extend those subsidies so that most Americans do not receive significant increases in their premiums?
Where'd you get that 115% number from?
Kaiser Family Foundation.
They retracted that. That data was run inappropriately. They changed the messaging on it. Go back and look at the website.
Now, that last clip was of Dr. Oz. Yes, that guy is still around. I try to forget sometimes. He's currently Trump's CMS administrator, which handles the Affordable Care Act and all of the health care coverage it provides. Now, here is the Kaiser Family Foundation website. They have not, in fact, retracted their data. The foundation still estimates that the average ACA enrollee's monthly premium would more than double, increasing by 114% if Republicans refuse to extend the subsidies. But they have a real problem on their hands because they are lying about things that directly impact the lives of millions of people. And that means millions of people in this country are starting to see the impact in their own lives and realize that what people like Mike Johnson and Dr. Oz and J.D. Vance are saying is not true. If you use Obamacare, you can go to healthcare.gov right now and see how much your monthly premium is going to go up next year. When you see that number, you can decide for yourself if this isn't a problem like Republicans are saying. It is a problem. Today, journalists from Punchbowl News also reported that inside a meeting of House Democrats today, pollster Molly Murphy presented data on the shutdown, data that showed that by a nearly 2-to-1 margin, voters said that preventing huge increases in health premiums for 20 million Americans was more important than ending the shutdown. The Mike Johnson plan here is not working. The Trump plan is not working. The J.D. Vance plan is not working. And that polling, by the way, was from more than a week ago. Now, leading Republicans, are trying to hold food access for more than 42 million Americans hostage. I don't think the American people, no matter who they voted for or what their political party is, are going to like that. But the question now is with a Republican Party that is willing to go to extremes like holding food hostage and who do not seem all too responsive to any political pressure other than from their boss and who are more than happy to just lie about everything they're doing. How do you negotiate with a party like that? How does this all end?
As we wrap up tonight's report, let's take a moment to step back and truly absorb what we've just heard. At its core, this story is not about party politics or legislative gridlock. It's about people. Millions of Americans, families, seniors, children, caught in the crossfire of political power games in Washington. What began as a debate over funding has now turned into a standoff that directly threatens the very basics of survival for some of the nation's most vulnerable citizens. When lawmakers begin treating food assistance like a bargaining chip, when 42 million Americans' meals are leverage for negotiation, we are no longer talking about policy. We're talking about humanity. The debate over SNAP funding and healthcare subsidies has exposed something deeper and far more troubling, a willingness to let ordinary people bear the cost of political theatre. The irony is hard to ignore. Those who preach fiscal responsibility are willing to gamble with the livelihoods of working families. Those who claim to fight for freedom are restricting access to food and healthcare, two of the most fundamental forms of freedom any society can offer. And the justifications, they shift by the hour, from budget priorities to political strategy to Democrats' fault. Yet behind every talking point is a parent wondering how to feed their child next week. Behind every delayed subsidy is a family facing an impossible choice between rent and medication. It's not just a political miscalculation, it's a moral one. Polling already shows that Americans across the spectrum recognise this. Whether Democrat, Republican or independent, most people understand that no family should be used as leverage in a shutdown. The data presented to House Democrats showing that voters prioritise protecting affordable healthcare over ending the shutdown itself sends a clear message. People care more about human impact than partisan wins, and that brings us to a deeper question, one that we as citizens and voters must ask ourselves: at what point do we stop accepting politics as usual? How long do we allow elected officials to weaponise basic needs, food, health, security, for ideological games? This isn't about left versus right. It's about right versus wrong. It's about truth versus manipulation. As the transcript revealed, misinformation is being spread at the highest levels, even by officials responsible for overseeing healthcare programmes. When facts are twisted, when data is denied, and when leadership prioritises optics over outcomes, democracy itself begins to erode from within. The story tonight isn't just a snapshot of one shutdown or one debate. It's a mirror reflecting the moral cost of political indifference. And it forces us to ask, what kind of country do we want to be? One that lets millions go hungry while leaders argue over headlines, or one that demands compassion, truth, and accountability from those in power? So as the lights go out in Washington offices and the rhetoric cools for the night, remember, the human cost doesn't pause. The mother checking her EBT balance at midnight, the diabetic wondering if their insulin will still be covered, the federal worker waiting for a paycheck that may not come. Their reality continues long after the cameras stop rolling. And maybe, just maybe, if enough of us refuse to look away, change becomes not just possible, but inevitable. If you found this report insightful, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more real, fact-based news commentary.